mentioned a few moments ago, in our program at the end of January, we honoured the more than 3/4 of a century of shortwave service from Radio Australia. On that previous occasion, we presented the outline story of 5 shortwave stations in continental Australia that carried the programming from the Melbourne studios of Radio Australia. These 5 stations were AWA Pennant Hills, New South Wales, ABC Lyndhurst, Victoria, ABC Wanneroo in Western Australia from both its old and new facilities, and Radio Australia Shepparton, Victoria. In our program today, we catch a glimpse of the remaining 5 shortwave stations that have carried the programming of Radio Australia from their studios in Melbourne, Victoria. But before we list those, we mention as an aside that during the year 1939, 2 large shortwave stations were under construction in Australia. One at Belconnen on the edge of Canberra City in the Australian Capital Territory, and the other at Coonawarra on the edge of Darwin City in the Northern Territory. Popular rumour back at the time conjectured that maybe these 2 shortwave stations were under construction for Australia Calling, the original name for Radio Australia. However, as time went by, it became obvious that Radio Australia was not involved, and instead both stations were under the control of the Royal Australian Navy for communication with Navy vessels. At the height of its operational capacity, the Belconnen Communication Station operated with a total of 38 shortwave transmitters and 44 antenna systems. The primary call signs for Belconnen were VHP and AXM. The Navy Communication Station at Belconnen was closed at the end of 2006, and it was replaced by a new station 100 miles further inland at Lyndoch, though it's operated remotely from Canberra. A new housing estate has since encroached into the previous station property at Belconnen. The Navy Wireless Transmitting Station Coonawarra commenced operations on September the 18th, 1939, at its inland location on the eastern outskirts of Darwin. This facility was in continuous usage until it was destroyed by the onslaught of Cyclone Tracy during the Christmas season in 1974. The main call sign at Coonawarra was AXI. Okay, well that's the end of the aside. The 6th station to carry programming of Radio Australia was at Bald Hills, Queensland, using call signs VLQ, VLM and RA. The first test broadcast from a new 10 kilowatt STC shortwave transmitter with call sign VLQ at Bald Hills, a dozen miles north of Brisbane, Queensland, took place on February the 14th, 1943 on 9660 kilohertz. 2 years later, the ABC introduced a daily 15-minute news bulletin over VLQ for the benefit of listeners in Papua New Guinea. Beginning on May 5th, 1974, Radio Australia augmented their daily shortwave service to Papua New Guinea with the introduction of a relay via another 10 kilowatt Bald Hills transmitter without call sign on 11885 kilohertz. At that stage, Bald Hills contained 3 10 kilowatt shortwave transmitters, which were used in rotation by the 3 services, Inland VLQ and VLM, and Radio Australia. The Radio Australia service to Papua New Guinea via Bald Hills ended just 2 years later, on May 2nd, 1976. Station number 7 was at Brandon, Queensland, using call signs VLG, VLJ, and VLS. This shortwave station was co-sited with medium wave 4QN near coastal Brandon, a few miles south of Townsville. There were 3 10 kilowatt transmitters at the Brandon site, and they carried Radio Australia programming to the Pacific for nearly a quarter century from 1988 to 2011, with the unannounced call signs VLG, VLJ, and VLS. Station number 8 was at Darwin, Northern Territory. The Australian government constructed a booster shortwave station for Radio Australia on the Cox Peninsula, across the harbour from Darwin City, and it began a relay of programming for Asia in 1968. The first 3 250 kilowatt transmitters were obtained from the Collins Company in the United States, and over the intervening years, another half-dozen high-powered transmitters were progressively installed at this location. Radio Australia on Cox Peninsula endured a varied history during its tenure of a third of a century. The station sustained significant damage during Cyclone Tracy at Christmas 1974. Funding for repair came slowly. Technical problems interrupted the full usage of the beleaguered station. It was off the air for several years, and in only partial usage for just as many more years. And it was ultimately leased to a Christian organisation, Christian Vision, under whom it was finally closed in 2010 when the land had to be returned to the local Aborigine people. Station number 9 was at Nangara, Western Australia. As we said, the Radio Australia shortwave relay station at Cox Peninsula, Northern Territory, was damaged by Cyclone Tracy at Christmas 1974. So, a new temporary station was needed as soon as possible, and test broadcasts were carried out from a vacant joint American-Australian NASA ground station at Nangara, near Perth in Western Australia, just 2 months later. These test transmissions were made over 2 modified SSB, single sideband transmitters, rated at 7.5 kilowatts at Nangara for a couple of weeks in late February and early March 1975. The tapes for these test broadcasts were prepared in the Radio Australia studios in Melbourne, for which QSL cards were issued with the location inscribed as Perth. And finally, station number 10 was at Carnarvon, Western Australia, using call signs VLK, VLL and VLM. As a result of the successful test transmissions from Nangara, Western Australia, work went ahead at another American-Australian NASA ground